Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find or support me. Previously on the channel, we have looked at the origins of both Scott Summers, who became the first X-Man, Cyclops, and his younger brother Alex, who later joined the team as Havok. If you've seen either of those videos, then you'll already be familiar with how this week's story starts. Following a vacation, Air Force test pilot Christopher Summers was flying his family home aboard a small, personal aircraft when they were attacked by an alien spaceship from the Shi'ar Empire. I talked more in depth about the Shi'ar in my video on Gladiator and the Imperial Guard, so refer to that for more details on them. With the plane going down, Christopher's wife, Catherine Ann, strapped their two sons to the plane's only parachute, allowing them to escape. Of course, at the time, Scott and Alex had no idea that their parents were teleported away moments before the plane crashed. You see, the attacking vessel was actually a scout ship that was sent to collect zoological specimens from various worlds. And on board this vessel was none other than the Shi'ar Emperor himself, Deken Neramani. He enjoyed personally overseeing such missions on occasion, and on this one he took a liking to the captured human woman. On the ship's monitor, he showed the couple that Scott and Alex's parachute had caught fire, leading them to believe that their children did not survive the crash. Upon returning to the Shi'ar throne world, Deken kept Catherine for himself, while Christopher was studied and confined to their slave pens. But another thing that Scott and Alex didn't know was that Catherine was pregnant at the time of the abduction. Desperate to save his wife and unborn child, Christopher eventually escaped from captivity. He made it all the way to the Emperor's bedchamber, where Deken was attempting to force himself on Catherine. Christopher intervened and attempted to strike down Deken, but was stopped by his armed guards. Wishing to make his attacker suffer, Deken did not kill Christopher, but instead fatally stabbed Catherine in front of him. On top of that, he pulled Christopher's unborn child out of Catherine's womb and showed it to him. As far as Christopher knew, his entire family was dead. Completely broken, Christopher Summers was sent to live out the rest of his days in the slave mines of Alcibar. However, his third son, Gabriel, having been so close to being born, narrowly survived. The Shi'ar placed his near-lifeless body into one of the incubation accelerators that they used for breeding slaves. In a matter of weeks, he reached adolescence and was pulled out to begin serving the Empire. While unaware of his heritage, Gabriel was sent to a hidden base on Earth that was run by the Shi'ar agent Devon Shakari, later known as Eric the Red. Among those he served, one who treated him well was an older woman named Lilandra. She sneakily gave him a book on Roman mythology, which Gabriel read multiple times. While far from glamorous, his life was at least peaceful until the day his mutant powers emerged. Suddenly, he gained the ability to harness and manipulate various forms of energy, including light, heat, and electricity. However, lacking control over these new powers, he inadvertently killed the one person who was kind to him, Lilandra. In grief and panic, he grabbed his meager belongings and fled the base, blasting away any Shi'ar who tried to stop him. He hid in the sewers beneath New York City, but was eventually found by human authorities. Not wanting to hurt anyone else, he surrendered, and was later brought to meet the renowned Scottish geneticist Dr. Moira MacTaggert, whom he felt he could trust. Taking him into her care, Moira brought Gabriel to her US-based research facility, where he began learning to control his abilities. There, he befriended 3 other mutants in training, Petra, Sway, and Darwin. Petra was a geomorph, allowing her to psionically move and reshape earth and stone. Sway could manipulate the flow of time within a small radius around herself, allowing her to slow or stop the movement of objects in her immediate vicinity. And Darwin had adaptability powers, allowing him to instantly metamorphosize into different forms to suit his situation, albeit without conscious control over how he changed. These four often watched news coverage of the mutant superheroes, the X-Men, never suspecting that Cyclops was Gabriel's older brother. But then one day, he was introduced to the team's founder, Professor Charles Xavier, who was a close friend and ally of Moira MacTaggert. Xavier suspected a familial connection between Gabriel and Scott, and even introduced the two. They had a brief training session together, during which Gabriel even displayed the ability to redirect Scott's optic blast. Xavier used his psychic abilities to confirm his suspicions, but kept this revelation secret for a time. Gabriel, meanwhile, overheard Xavier and Moira talking and learned that the professor thought that with the proper training, he could be ready to join the X-Men. Fantasizing about this possibility, he decided to name himself after the Roman god of fire and chose the alias Kid Vulcan. Then came an event, which we've mentioned on the channel before, in which the X-Men were sent to investigate a powerful mutant signature on the island of Krakoa. They traveled there and learned that the island itself was the mutant as it was actually alive. You may recall how most of the team was captured while Cyclops narrowly escaped, but what if I told you that there was more to the story? In truth, Cyclops was captured along with everyone else and imprisoned on the living island. Needing a team to rescue them, Xavier's first choice was to ask Gabriel and the rest of Moira's students. The four were rapidly given advanced training via telepathy, and thus Darwin, Petra, Sway, and Kid Vulcan became X-Men. Before the new team embarked on their first mission, Xavier pulled Gabriel aside and privately told him about his familial connection to Cyclops. The foursome touched down on the island safely, and Gabriel even succeeded in rescuing his brother. With his mutant powers temporarily suppressed, Cyclops boarded the Stratojet and tried to contact Xavier, while Vulcan and his team attempted to find the others. However, it seems that Gabriel's powers had hurt the island when he freed his brother, making Krakoa angrier and more savage. It attacked with far more ferocity than before, slicing Sway in half and killing her almost instantly. Cyclops could only watch in horror as his newfound brother and allies were seemingly incinerated in a fiery blast with the intensity of a volcanic eruption. However, as Sway died, her body released the last of her mutant energy, slowing time around her teammates enough for Petra to create a cavern beneath them before she was completely incinerated. While Petra died as well, the remaining two fell into the cavern, where Darwin kept Vulcan alive by instinctively transforming into living energy and bonding with him. Believing his brother dead, Cyclops returned to Professor Xavier to report what had happened. Cerebro seemingly confirmed these deaths when it failed to detect any sign of Vulcan and the others. Wishing to spare him the pain of losing a brother, Xavier telepathically erased Scott's memory of Gabriel and his team's rescue attempt. Instead, Scott believed that Krakoa had let him go when it captured the other original X-Men so that he would bring it more mutants. From there, the story continues as you probably remember it, with Xavier recruiting a new team of X-Men including Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and more. This group joined Cyclops in a successful rescue, and together the United X-Men defeated the Living Island. Ultimately, the magnetic mutant Lorna Dane succeeded in cleaving Krakoa from the Earth itself, sending it flying into the depths of space. However, a chunk of Earth broke away from the island and settled into orbit near the moon, and within that chunk was the cavern containing the dormant Gabriel Summers. There he remained in a state of near death for years, until the event known as M-Day. Empowered by an energy source called the Life Force, a mentally unstable Scarlet Witch cast a reality-warping spell that depowered the vast majority of Earth's mutant population. I've talked in depth about those events on the channel before, so follow the link in the description for a more detailed explanation. But there are two important things from that story to note for today. The first is that in the midst of these reality warps, Professor Xavier went missing. The second is that a massive number of mutants, many of which had very powerful energy signatures, were suddenly transformed into regular humans. This mass depowering released an enormous surge of mutant energy that awakened Vulcan. This also pushed his energy manipulation abilities to a level that has been described as beyond Omega. In addition to that, because Darwin had absorbed their remnants before fusing with Gabriel, Vulcan also gained access to Petra and Sway's abilities. Making his way back to Earth, his energies were detected by the X-Men. Cyclops, Wolverine, and Marvel Girl were dispatched to investigate and found Vulcan in upstate New York. Mind you, this Marvel Girl was not the original Jean Grey, but her and Scott's daughter, Rachel, from the alternate Days of Future Past timeline. Angry and disoriented, Vulcan attacked and took Scott and Rachel captive. He held them prisoner in Moira's old facility, which by this point was long abandoned. During this time, Moira herself was thought to be dead, as the world believed that she was the first human to fall victim to the deadly Legacy virus, which initially targeted mutants. While we now know that she was neither human nor truly dead, for now let's just say that she wasn't around at the time. Her old ally, the Irish mutant Sean Cassidy, aka Banshee, returned to her lab on Scotland's Muir Island looking for clues to where Xavier might have gone. While he didn't find that, he did uncover old video logs detailing Vulcan's identity. Wishing to deliver such sensitive information in person, he boarded a commercial flight back to America. As the plane approached Westchester County, Vulcan took the X-Men's aircraft, the Blackbird, and sent it careening towards the commercial flight. Banshee attempted to use his sonic scream to stop it, but ultimately failed and perished along with over 100 innocent passengers. Nonetheless, Wolverine and Nightcrawler investigated the wreckage and salvaged Moira's tapes. While they were damaged, Beast was able to recover enough data to begin piecing together what had happened. Furthermore, Gabriel allowed Scott and Rachel to walk free long enough to realize where they were being held captive, before revealing to Scott that the two were brothers, and that more happened on Krakoa than he remembered. They were interrupted by a manned sentinel sent by the Office of National Emergency, who had been on high alert since the Blackbird crash. However, the machine was quickly defeated by Vulcan, who proceeded to kill the pilot inside. In the midst of this, Rachel escaped and returned to the X-Men, but it seems that even this was part of Vulcan's plan. He then traveled to Muir Island, taking his brother with him to await the arrival of his true target. Sure enough, by causing enough suffering and death, Vulcan succeeded in drawing Xavier out of hiding. While the professor had been depowered on M-Day, he also regained the use of his legs when his body was reconstructed in the Scarlet Witch's final reality warp, and so he arrived on Muir Island to confront Gabriel. Soon after, a group of X-Men, including Vulcan's other brother Havok, arrived as well. This was the final piece in the puzzle of Vulcan's plan to expose the truth that Xavier had buried all those years ago. His schemes were nearly ruined by the professor's depowering, but he instead forced Marvel Girl to link all of their minds together and reveal what really happened on Krakoa, and what Xavier had done to cover it up. On top of that, Xavier also explained the circumstances of Gabriel's birth, and Gabriel learned about the death of his mother at the hands of Emperor Deken. And as a result of all these mental connections, Rachel realized that Darwin was still alive, lying dormant inside Vulcan, and succeeded in freeing him. The X-Men then launched an attack on Vulcan for everything he had done, but were swiftly tossed aside. Having accomplished what he set out to do on Earth, Vulcan took off into space with a new goal of taking revenge on the Shi'ar Emperor. After a week in space, he came upon a Shi'ar starship and swiftly destroyed it. Interrogating the craft's lone survivor, Gabriel learned a number of important things. First, the Shi'ar throne world, Chandelier, was defended heavily enough to hold off even cosmic entities. Second, without the use of Shi'ar stargates, it would take Gabriel years to get there in the first place. Third, and perhaps most important, D'Ken was no longer the Emperor, as he had been in a catatonic state of near death for years. This dates back to a conflict between the Shi'ar and the X-Men, in which D'Ken attempted to harness the power of the ancient M-Cron crystal to conquer the universe. This happened after the Krakoa incident, and so Gabriel was still lying dormant in orbit around the Earth at the time. During that battle, the X-Men were aided by the Starjammers, a group of space pirates led by Christopher Summers, better known by this point as Corsair. It was one of the Starjammers, Raza Longknife, who threw D'Ken into the M-Cron crystal, driving him so mad that he was rendered catatonic. While D'Ken was kept alive and placed into stasis, he was succeeded by his younger sister, Lilandra Neramani. As an ally of Xavier and the X-Men, Magistrix Lilandra established peace between the Earth and the Shi'ar Empire. However, Vulcan would not be denied his revenge. If he could no longer take vengeance on D'Ken, then he would strike at the Empire itself. He then found a trio of Shi'ar warships, destroying 2 of them and forcing the third to surrender. Vulcan was brought aboard the alien vessel, and the captain pledged his loyalty to the man who had bested his forces in combat. Over the following days, Gabriel learned more about Shi'ar history and culture from the captain as they approached the throne world Chandelier. This included the existence of D'Ken and Lilandra's older sister, Calcier Neramani, better known as Deathbird. The captain believed that she had been exiled and unheard of for years, but the truth is that Deathbird had been imprisoned for her treasonous crimes and repeated attempts to usurp her sister's throne. As he made his way into Shi'ar space, Vulcan also commanded his new crew to destroy the stargates behind them, hindering any who would attempt to follow. But then, a powerful group of enemies appeared before him, the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. Impressively, Vulcan did well against his powerful opponents and even succeeded in killing several of their members. However, these Super Guardians were led by the mightiest warrior in the entire Shi'ar Empire, Gladiator. With a single blow, Gladiator destroyed Vulcan's left eye, leaving him with a noticeable facial scar. A second punch ended the fight by rendering Gabriel Summers unconscious. He was brought to the highest security prison in Shi'ar space, located on a dark and lonely moon. With no natural light, the days blended together and his lost eye was replaced with a synthetic one. Of course, he was also outfitted with a neural dampening collar that suppressed his mutant powers. He constantly felt his scar and contemplated his failure while being mocked by a vision of his younger self. Then one day, he was awakened by a member of a group called the Secret Order, who sought to depose Empress Lilandra. The mysterious Shi'ar freed Vulcan from his cell and told him that his way forward was 2 levels down. While the savior was slain by the guards during their escape, he succeeded in removing Vulcan's collar, restoring his abilities. With little choice but to follow the path that had been suggested to him, Vulcan fought his way downward until he found and freed another noteworthy prisoner, Empress Lilandra's treasonous sister, Deathbird. The two joined forces to escape aboard a stolen jump ship together, and over the following days fought side by side against Imperial forces. Amidst the passion, adrenaline, and bloody violence, the two grew closer and soon became lovers. Over the following weeks, Vulcan's love for Deathbird grew to rival his hatred for D'Ken. This loyalty was tested when she eventually brought him to see the body of her brother, still catatonic, as some still sought to restore him. By this point, Deathbird had tired of her own failed attempts to claim the throne, but would prefer her brother's rule to Lilandra's. However, D'Ken's neural pathways had been severed, and it would take an unknown amount of time for him to fully recover. And so Vulcan offered to use his energy-manipulating powers to reignite and reconnect these electrical pathways. D'Ken's loyalist, Araki, protested, citing Vulcan's blood feud with the Emperor, but Deathbird allowed him to proceed, and astonishingly, he succeeded in rousing the sleeping Magister. Vulcan fully admitted to her that he still planned on killing D'Ken eventually, but Deathbird insisted that she would tame these urges. While D'Ken had no remorse for his previous actions, he decided to repay his debt to Vulcan by invoking an ancient Shi'ar law, one that specified that any child born in the High Palace on Chandalar could be considered royalty under the Empire, and thus Vulcan would be allowed to marry Deathbird and be officially inducted into the Shi'ar Imperium. In the midst of all of this, Lilandra was betrayed and imprisoned, allowing D'Ken to reclaim the throne. Meanwhile, Xavier had already gathered a team of X-Men, including Havok, Polaris, Darwin, and Marvel Girl, and was pursuing Vulcan into Shi'ar space. While the destruction of the Stargates did indeed slow them down considerably, they eventually succeeded in making the journey, joined forces with the Starjammers, and freed Lilandra from captivity. But amid these battles, Xavier was captured by D'Ken's forces and scheduled to be executed directly after the wedding of Vulcan and Deathbird. The whole situation came to a head when the X-Men, the Starjammers, and the Shi'ar still loyal to Lilandra attacked the ceremony. Unfortunately for them, Gladiator and the Imperial Guard were loyal to the throne itself and not any one individual, and so they stood on the side of Emperor D'Ken. And in the ensuing battle, Vulcan threw Xavier into the M'Kraan crystal just as had been done to D'Ken years earlier. This nearly destroyed his mind, but Xavier was ultimately rescued by Darwin, who dove in after him. Meanwhile, Vulcan also seized this opportunity to take revenge on D'Ken Naramani, killing the Mad Emperor once and for all. Having been declared a prince under Shi'ar law, having married into the royal family's line of succession, and having defeated the standing Magister in combat, Gabriel Summers then invoked his right to claim the throne and declared himself Emperor Vulcan of the Shi'ar Imperium. He then intended on killing Lilandra, but his father Corsair intervened. It seems, however, that Vulcan had gone truly mad with power, as he had no qualms over killing his own father. With a single energy blast, Christopher Summers, Corsair, was dead. After witnessing his brother murder their father, Alex Summers, Havok, attacked in a rage, but his own plasma energy powers were completely ineffective against Vulcan. Polaris, on the other hand, was able to strike with her mastery of magnetism, crushing Vulcan's ribs with his own armor, and badly injuring him. In the end, Deathbird saved her lover's life by grabbing him and escaping with the Imperial Guard. Several of the X-Men, including Xavier and Darwin, returned to Earth where they discovered that the M'Kraan crystal had restored the Professor's mutant powers. Havok, meanwhile, took his father's place as the leader of the Starjammers. Polaris and Marvel Girl joined as well, and together they remained in space to continue fighting against Vulcan's tyrannical rule. They weren't the only ones, as a number of Shi'ar considered him a false emperor, and the universe's largest empire began to fracture. Complicating matters further, a race that had been nearly exterminated by the Shi'ar re-emerged and attacked both Vulcan and Lilandra's forces. This race was previously known as the M'Kraan, as millennia ago they lived on the same planet as the Crystal, known simply as the World. They drove away or eliminated any others who lived in what they considered M'Kraan Holy Lands, but then, 1,000 years ago, they suffered a similar fate. Also, considering the crystal to be sacred, the Shi'ar attacked the M'Kraan people, driving them from the world. Swearing vengeance, this race renamed themselves the Sayal Tal, which means death to the Shi'ar. When Emperor Vulcan began his plans to resume the Shi'ar's expansion through the cosmos, the Sayal Tal attacked. They unveiled their doomsday weapon, Finality, which could destroy entire planets by creating portals large enough to transport a small star, crashing it into their target's atmosphere. With billions of lives on the line, Vulcan convinced Havok and the Starjammers to aid him and the Imperial Guard against this grave threat. Together, the two brothers succeeded in defeating the Sayal Tal eldest, leaving them leaderless. Havok hoped to broker peace between their peoples, but Vulcan betrayed his brother and immediately began executing their remaining foes. Throwing Havok into the vacuum of space, Vulcan took over Finality Station and used it to destroy the Sayal Tal fleet. However, Havok survived and returned to battle Vulcan and destroy the superweapon. Vulcan and his forces escaped yet again, this time taking Havok and most of the Starjammers captive. Furthermore, Vulcan's victory over the Sayal Tal swayed more Shi'ar to his side, allowing him to resume the Empire's expansion. He conscripted several dangerous criminals into a Black Ops branch of the Imperial Guard dubbed the Praetorians, a name that was traditionally applied to honorable veteran warriors. Havok and the other Starjammers ultimately escaped from captivity and clashed with this group of Praetorians. Meanwhile, representatives of the Intergalactic Council, a governing body of aliens who had made peace agreements with Lilandra, approached Vulcan to demand an explanation for his recent conquests. The Mad Emperor, however, was unwilling to explain or negotiate, and simply murdered the visiting delegates. Vulcan and Deathbird subsequently led the Imperial Guard's most elite Super Guardians in a battle against the Starjammers and Lilandra. One of the Praetorians involved in this conflict was a member of the Hodin race, beings made of living solar plasma. When the Hodin removed its protective armor in an attempt to finish its foes, Havok realized that he was able to absorb the solar energy, powering his abilities enough to damage his brother. Meanwhile, Lilandra battled her own sister, Deathbird, impaling her with a spear and grievously wounding her. While Havok wanted to stay and finish Vulcan, this battle largely ended in a stalemate, with both sides escaping, although the Starjammer Raza was taken captive by the Shi'ar. Deathbird survived her injuries but fell into a coma, and Emperor Vulcan, angrier than ever, turned his attention back towards conquest in her honor. However, his great expansion would soon put him into conflict with another empire, one led by a royal family with inhuman powers of their own. This event would shake the galaxy and determine the future of the Shi'ar Imperium. It would be a clash of titans. a battle of empires, a war of kings. But that'll have to be a story for another time. Obviously, if you would like to read it for yourself, you can find the entire War of Kings event on the Marvel Unlimited app. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. I also have a Ko-fi now, Ko-fi, if you prefer to support me that way, by signing up for any amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That being said, if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!